Okay, before you guys burn me at the stakes for what I'm about to say, just hear me out. Isekai is the best genre in anime. Hey, I said hear me out. Isekai is also the worst genre in anime. Now I know what I've said is like a mind-warping paradox that has no common sense behind it, but if you think about it, that's the perfect way to describe Isekai. Isekai, a mind-warping paradox that has no common sense behind it. Einstein. Now viewer, I know what you're thinking. You've got genres like shonen that have mastered the formula to create unbridled hype that keeps people engaged decades after their show had finished. Romance, which has been able to tug at the hearts of all weebs around the world. Fantasy, just isekai, but the main character wasn't reincarnated. So with all these genres out there, who in their right mind would put the words isekai and best in the same sentence? Hey, how's it going? Yep, that's right. You got my dumbass saying isekai is the best genre. If I was to say what makes the isekai genre good, it would have to be its uniqueness. Yes, you heard me right. The genre that has everyone complaining about its unoriginality, with a main character that's a loser in the real world, dies, gets reincarnated into another world, and suddenly becomes the most OP in their verse, defeats the demon lord, and gets all the bitches, is actually one of the most unique genre in anime. And keep in mind, what I've said describes about 90% of all isekai in the genre. So yeah, it seems that I've contradicted myself with this one, which is why I'm also saying that it's the worst genre in anime. For fuck's sakes. When you take a deep dive into isekai, all you're left with is absolute garbage that makes you question who the fuck is watching these shows. But every once in a while, you find a piece of gold in the waste bin, and instead of the same old power fantasy with no real thought put into it, you get this experience that no other genre has ever made you feel before. What I mean by this is that most, if not all genres, have a specific structure that they follow that can make them become predictable. This doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, it just means that you know what you're expecting. You know the saying, don't fix what isn't broken. When you get into a battle shonen anime and the main character is facing off against a seriously tough opponent, you know this motherfucker's gonna win, because they always win. And even if they don't at first, they come back later stronger than ever. Or romance, with multiple love interests. You know the first girl introduced has a 101% chance of winning, but that doesn't stop you from rooting for a later character introduced. You get to a certain point where you've watched a lot of anime that you start to understand the formula. You can see a pattern in the way certain events are structured. Whether it be a show about a ninja who has a demon fox inside him, or a monster brute who has no magic in a world full of magic whilst having a demon inside him, or even a man who can turn himself into a literal chainsaw demon because of a demon inside him. Now that's just one example, but you can find these patterns scattered across any genre. Isekai doesn't really have that, but also has it the most out of any genre. I'm generally writing myself into a wall here. This is what I mean when I say the isekai genre is just a paradox. And when I say uniqueness, no, I don't mean anime like that bloody vending machine isekai. Though I heard it does a pretty good job at explaining how Japanese vending machines work. What I mean is shows like Mushoku Tensei, Re:Zero, Konosuba. Shows like these single-handedly carry the isekai genre on their back. They're all unique in their own right, and the only similarities they share is the fact that they got transported into a fantasy world. There's not a time when I'm watching these shows where I can predict what's going to happen like I can with other genres, because they're all structured so fundamentally different from each other. Mushoku Tensei, you watch someone's whole life play out, which means it can easily go from a slice of life to a whole ass-driven plot story. Re:Zero, a psychological thriller that can go from a very action-heavy plot to a deep character study. Konosuba, a hilarious comedy that parries how stupid the whole fantasy isekai genre is. You know, even the fucking vending machine anime, because what genre in their right minds would make the main character a fucking vending machine? Just look at any 8 out of 10 isekai out there. I can guarantee the only thing that they have in common is the concept of being put into another world. The way these authors are able to make these stories so complex kinda makes me wish isekai as a genre didn't exist, because the isekai genre itself is too broad of a concept to be a genre, and because of how broad the concept is what allows for it to be so unique from other genres. It's just so popular and widespread with content that it has to be considered a genre. And going back to the joke I said about fantasy being isekai without the summoning, it has some truth to it. Almost every isekai doesn't have a reason to be an isekai. It could just as easily be a fantasy. What separates a great isekai and a good isekai is when they go that extra mile to delve into their time in the real world. You can understand why they would want to go to another world, and it just makes them more relatable and someone you want to root for. This doesn't usually happen in isekai. They'll die and just completely forget about where they came from. Realistically, if a genre has more bad content than good content, that would make the genre bad. And yes, that is correct, but I have no common sense. I genuinely believe that the small amount of good outshines the absurdly large amount of bad. This is what pisses me off about isekai. It has some of the most complex characters while also having the most bland and boring characters. There's a reason why people joke about all main characters in isekai looking the same. You get some very interesting worlds whilst also getting the most plain, same circular worlds that plagues almost every isekai. It genuinely boggles my mind that a genre can be so good and also be so bad at the same time. It's just an endless paradox that's accompanied with eternal pain that the average isekai enjoyer has to go through, whilst also being looked down upon by every other genre enjoyer. I guarantee if the genre wasn't so overpopulated with then these people wouldn't look down on isekai. But sadly, due to the abundance of these trash isekai, it dampens the reputation of the actual good isekai that have a lot of care and substance put into them. Now, because I have such a strong opinion on how I think good isekai shouldn't be overlooked and looked down as lesser than other genres, and how for this whole video so far I've clowned on the trashy isekai as being lesser than the other genres, you can kinda guess what my opinion of trashy isekai are. I like them. Okay. I know I've thrown all credibility in the water, but there's a reason there are so many trash isekai out there. Sometimes, watching deep, complex shows can get tiring. Sometimes you just need trash to balance it out. It's the same with harems. And I say this with full conviction, I love trash isekai. While a good isekai have three-dimensional characters with a good plot and great world building, trash isekai is just brain-rotting fun. And I'm all for it. Let's be real. Using your brain all the time can be annoying. It's like a cooldown period where you don't have to analyze anything and you can just turn your brain off without having to worry about missing anything important because none of it is important in the first place. Have I been brainwashed by a cult into enjoying this type of anime? Probably not, but I still wouldn't be surprised. And another great thing about trash isekai is that when all is said and done and you go back to the more complex shows that require you to pay attention, it is not only refreshing but also makes you appreciate the good shows even more than you ever had. However, there's an important distinction you have to make between trash isekai, because believe it or not, you can have good trash isekai and bad trash isekai. So my dear viewer, you're probably not wondering what the difference is, but I'll tell you anyway. The super official way to tell if you're watching a good trash isekai is if you are still awake after completing the first episode of the show. Now that we've come to this conclusion, let me rephrase myself, because in reality, there's no such thing as a good and bad trash isekai, due to the fact that they're all bad in the first place. There are just some trash isekai that are just more boring than watching paint dry on a wall. And unfortunately, it is nearly impossible to tell the difference between a boring and trash isekai because they all look the same. The only way to figure it out is by consuming the media and seeing what makes you fall asleep and what makes you turn into a brain-dead zombie. And if you're currently thinking to yourself that it sounds pointless and a waste of your time, good job. You are classified as a normal anime watcher, or for what it's worth. But be honest with me. Go look at yourself in the mirror and deepen your psychology for a second. Do you want to be just normal? Do you want to be remembered by the people you love as someone who was just normal? If not, join us. Join us in the rabbit hole that is the isekai genre. Feign all common sense and analytical thinking. Turn your brain off and consume the exact same thing over and over again with the endless amount of new isekai coming out every season. If you still want to be normal, well, I tried. If for some reason you're actually considering watching trashy isekai and want to know a good brain-dead fun isekai, then go check out Eminence in a Shadow. If I had to describe this show in one word, it would have to be stupid. And if I had to describe it in a sentence, it would be, this show is so fucking stupid. It has everything a trash isekai needs. An OP main character that never loses, anime girls, and it's set in a fantasy world filled with magic. If I had to say what separates this one from your average trash isekai, it would have to be the fact that this show doesn't take itself seriously whilst taking place in a very serious political world. You'll have moments of twists and turns where the stakes are at an all-time high with tension reaching its absolute peak. And then at the same time, you'll have the main character, Shadow, playing the fucking piano under the moon because he thinks it looks cool. It's the epitome of dumb fun that you can just turn your brain off without a care in the world. So if you haven't already, go watch Eminence in a Shadow. It's absolutely hilarious. So yeah, this whole video has been one contradiction after another, but that's just how isekai is. Isekai isn't a genre, it's a lifestyle. Jeff Bezos. Now hopefully you can understand why I think isekai isn't the best or the worst genre. Isekai is the best and worst genre in anime. It makes no sense and it never will, and that's okay. Probably. Look, I'm just tired of hearing people say Re:Zero, Mushoku Tensei, or any other good isekais can't be compared to the other genres because isekai is a subpar genre. They are genuinely good shows that should be viewed as such, and just because they are in the same category as these doesn't diminish its quality. So instead of saying this is a good isekai, let's stop the slander and segregation and say that this is a good show for isekai standards. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you made it this far and you like my yapping, liking and subscribing would be greatly appreciated, and yeah, go watch isekai.